So the sidewalks have been reconstructed, as I'm sure anyone who's been out of Powder House Boulevard has seen, and the street has also been repaved. This was done in early July, so we're going on about a month now that this has been the case. What happens is that we will usually wait about a month to make sure that the asphalt has cured, and then we will go back in and we will put in striping after that. We've also deployed some cones in front of the West Somerville Neighborhood School to sort of temporarily mimic the flex posts that will eventually be replaced permanently like they were earlier this spring. As noted in the traffic safety plan earlier this year, we also installed some radar feedback signs, which are those nifty little signs that show your speed. They're solar powered, and we tried to place those in areas where we noticed that there is speeding, longer stretches of the boulevard. The lower section of the boulevard doesn't have as much right now in terms of some of the safety measures that we've been implementing, so we have a couple down there, as well as one a little bit further down closer to North Street. We can collect data on those, so we do plan to go out and see how things like the recent repaving versus new measures that will be implemented affect speeds on the boulevard. We are still intending to do the four-way stop pilot at Curtis Street. For everyone that has been involved in the process thus far, this has been one of the measures that we've been. So there was a suggestion at the last meeting and in general feedback to wait until school is out. We thought that was a great idea. As soon as school is out, the street got repaved, so we figured that it made sense to wait until the stop bars and crosswalks were put back into the street. So that trial will still be happening. It just will be happening in a couple weeks as opposed to earlier in the process. But we will be putting up signs soon. We're going to bag them for now at each approach to Curtis Street. And then when the stop bars and crosswalks will in, we'll remove those and then we'll turn off the signals or bag them or otherwise indicate that they're not functioning, and we will begin the pilot. We will also be installing Somerville's first asphalt speed humps in the next couple of weeks. So we had done a trial where we tested out some rubber speed tables out here in front of the school and a little bit further down by North Street, so we have 3 of those out there. We had an opportunity with the current contractor that has been doing the sidewalks and paving the boulevard to come back in and put in asphalt speed humps to mimic the ones that were out there earlier. We thought it would be best to take advantage of that opportunity so that we don't have a lackluster or substandard winter condition where we have to remove those rubber tables. So we decided to take advantage of that opportunity, and where those 3 rubber speed tables were before, they will be replaced by a similar asphalt permanent feature, and that will also be happening in the next 2 weeks. The last measure in terms of the updates from the traffic safety plan is that we are still looking into the hawk signal as well, and the final treatment for right out here in front of the school. As noted in an earlier presentation, this is dependent on the success of the Curtis Street four-way stop pilot. We do also want to look at the effect that these permanent asphalt speed humps have on speeding and how people interact with pedestrians in the crosswalk here, as well as looking at some local examples as well. We have a couple of new hawk signals down on Beacon Street. There's 1 or 2 over in Cambridge as well. So we want to study those and see how they compare and just confirm that this is in fact the best treatment for the boulevard. If anything, it does change in that regard, we will make sure that the community is aware of it. However, if we do believe that it's best to go forward with this design, we will start designing the hawk signal in earnest. So there will be another couple months of study before we move forward on that. So I also want to talk quickly about what we learned from the last meeting. So we collected handouts. There were some comments and questions. But we really learned a lot from the handouts in terms of receiving feedback and collecting community input. So, everyone had their individual thoughts, but we tried to group that a little bit into how some of the more frequent comments and sort of things that were coming up more commonly. There was a lot to do with preserving parking or just general parking concerns. There was a lot around prioritizing safety for vulnerable road users, whether that's pedestrians or cyclists. Improving traffic calming was another popular one, and slowing cars down the boulevard in general. So there were a number of comments that came up a lot. We did even try to take some things that did not come up as frequently, but that we wanted to make sure found a place and that we were thinking about, like thinking about people that need to park and have mobility issues, or parking at the West Somerville Neighborhood School for residents at off hours and trying to think of creative solutions. So things like that were offered up as well. This information is available on the Powder House Blvd planning website. If you haven't already, I suggest you check that out. There's a lot of good information on there. A full summary of the meeting from last time, as well as some some of these results and results from the survey. We did also look at how people ranked the various options that were presented at the last meeting. We took a look at what was presented in the handouts and comments that I received from the meeting handouts. We also had an online survey. They painted slightly different pictures. We don't want to assume that the data that we found is representative.
You go back.
No, let's go forward.
I can't read it.
We have results from the meetings in terms of how people rank their strongest preferences, and then we also have results from the online survey, and it's just giving us a little bit better sense of how people rank their priorities and how they felt that we should move forward with that Boulevard.
Just in general, if people are interested in the detail on this, first of all, they're online.
Yeah.
And second of all, if someone has a question about it, we can go over in detail in the Q&A.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing on these surveys is just to remember, none of these are scientific surveys, and they don't stand up to that level of rigor. But we'll go through the feedback if people want to see it.
All right, so with that, that's my piece, and I'm going to hand it off to our Director of Mobility, Brad Rossing.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Adam. Most of you I know. I'm your neighbor, Brad Rossing. I live 2 blocks up the hill on West Adams Street. My 3.5-year-old will start kindergarten here a year and a half from now in the great Somerville Public Schools. I get around by bicycle, on my feet, I ride the bus at Clarendon Hill, as well as 96, 94, and 80 over on College Avenue. I shop at Johnny's Stop and Shop, so folks probably see I'm here and play around with my little guy. It is always very exciting for us to see the level of engagement and enthusiasm and participation in this process. So one of the things that we have seen as people have become so engaged is questions about how the city makes its decisions vis-a-vis big policy conversations that we have as a community. People have said, hey, how does this project and the decision-making process connect to our citywide comprehensive plan, to the summer vision process? How does this connect to the city's work on its climate forward plan? How does this connect to our Vision Zero commitment, which is an international movement to eliminate traffic crashes that result in severe injuries and fatal fatalities? So we just wanted to kind of make sure that folks understood that if you want to see the outputs of our community process, our democracy at work, these documents and these processes give you a sense of our community's commitment to transparency, to community process, and to progressive mobility solutions. We want to make sure that our sidewalks, our streets, our bikeways, our parking, and our motor vehicle travel lanes serve everybody's needs. Institutions, businesses, loading, all of these things need to factor in, and they're captured in these processes. So check these out online. But what's the headline? They all tell us that we are at a moment in history where we have had 50 years worth of American society pushing us towards a single solution for everybody's mobility. And that is contrary to the history of walkable urbanism in this country, and it's contrary to the history of Somerville. This is a streetcar suburb. This is a walking community, a community where people historically were able to get around on a bicycle. And clearly in the 1950s, 1960s, 70s, and 80s, that dynamic changed. It changed through public subsidy at the federal level, it changed through private activities, and we are all now dealing with the consequences. Our community has asked our mayor and our staff to unwind that ball of twine, and it takes time. So we wanted to take a moment and make sure that people understood. For many of you who have emailed us and said, hey, what are y'all doing to keep us safe? If I choose or I have no other choice but to get around my bike, what are y'all doing to keep us safe? Well, the good news is that we've made great progress, and even here in 2019, can I have a quick show of hands? Has everybody traveled over to Trum Field lately and seen our parking protected bike lane that we just opened up on Trum Field? It's awesome. This makes me so proud as a resident. We're looking towards Magoon here in the distance, looking east on Broadway. Every street is different. Every street has different land uses. Every street has different geometry, and therefore the way that you allocate space when you're trying to serve the diverse interests of 80,000 people changes. Here on Broadway, we had enough room that we were able to tuck the parking in off of the curb, create this nice generous buffer. You won't be able to read it, but you can check out the slides. This little sign says parking over here, bike over here. So now all of a sudden, you're able to ride your bike on the curbside and not mess around with mixed traffic. That's a wonderful evolution in the way that Somerville residents are able to get around. Has anybody traveled over on Washington Street towards Cobble Hill, Earl Street, Sullivan Square? I know it's hard because of the Green Line bridge closures, but we're really, really pleased that in this context-specific location, where you've got this crazy 90-foot wide street on Washington Street coming off McGrath Highway, same sort of thing. We're able to tuck the parking in, and there's no cars there on this day that Justin was out riding on his bike, but again, same signs. Park here, bike here. We've got buses that need to merge. We've got a bike share station. We've got on-street parking. We've got a traffic signal. We evaluate each street differently, and we go through community process to make sure that all of our residents and stakeholders are able to participate in those processes. So just wanted to make sure that folks understood that when we have the opportunity, this is the priority, making sure that people have legitimate choice, legitimate safety, and how to get around. Okay, so a couple other quick examples. And again, Somerville Climate Plan, our visionary commitment to eliminate carbon emissions that originate in this city, calls on us to transform the way that we get around, to make sure that people who need automobile mobility, who need buses, who need delivery trucks, still can have their needs met, but to really emphasize protected bike facilities, to manage parking resources for the benefit of everybody. So anybody who has gone to the old Boys and Girls Club on Washington Street in Union Square has seen the first parking protected bike lane that the city of Somerville deployed back in 2017. And again, here we had enough width that we just cut the parking off. You get this little slot for the bike riders to ride on the curb, and it goes for a couple of blocks. Much lower stress facility. That's when you start to invite people who have different risk tolerance and different comfort levels. And so we preserve the parking here. Sometimes people out here in my neighborhood on the west side don't always get down to Union, but if you're commuting from Spring Hill, from Porter Square, from West Somerville down to Kendall, you're often using Webster Avenue. Webster is the second most important bicycle highway in Somerville. And this was a really, really fun project for us because our residents, our abutters, our activists, and our elected officials came together, and they actually asked the city, they said, hey, we as a local neighborhood feel that it's actually more valuable for us to emphasize a high visibility crosswalk to reduce kind of the crash exposure for pedestrians crossing the street down here, and we want to actually get these protected bike lanes. That was a case specific on Webster Avenue, and it was just a really fun exercise of kind of the grassroots coming up from below and the city working with them from above to actually get a great complete street project over here where you're no longer just moving, all of the regional and suburban commuters who are tearing through our neighborhoods. So there are lessons learned from all of these projects as we think about the Boulevard. Everybody's here to ask, is this decision making? You guys have made a decision. As George said, no, this is part of the process. We want the maximum engagement. We want people to stay plugged in because there are technical and community questions that need to be answered as we move forward with the right solution set for the Boulevard. This is the current striping plan. And I know that it's disappointing for some folks because with those projects that I just listed off, clearly the state of the art in keeping people safe, no matter how you get around. Well, I do want to emphasize that crashes go down for all modes of travel when you emphasize pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. However, we worked through a community process over the last couple of years, and this was the solution that we came up with, which is emphasizing one lane of bicycle travel, and it's just a 5-foot traditional lane. And we know that there's frustration, and we'll create space in this meeting for people to talk about how we can potentially work together to do something different. But this is the general cross-section that people can expect for 2019. Preserve parking on both sides, skinny up the travel lanes to slow the motor vehicles down. We've done all sorts of research that says narrower travel lanes produce slower driving speeds, and that is principle number one for all of us right now. Creating some dedicated space for people on bikes, which you did not have last year. We have never had dedicated bike facilities on the Boulevard, and clearly some folks in this room are going to tell us that they want more, and that is your right and your responsibility to tell us those things. But we also want to point out that this was not available last year, and we're pleased that we're keeping that as our temporary striping plan for now. So as Adam said, we have no stripe condition. The oils and the petroleum of the asphalt are baking out in this hot weather, and the pavement is ready to accept its striping. The first thing that will happen is the high visibility, high durability thermoplastic crosswalks that will be installed over the next couple of weeks at all of the legal crosswalks. And the stop bars, so people know where to stop, and stop signs and traffic signals. For the long lines, those lane assignments, and the open community conversation that's still occurring, we will use low durability paints, because we know that they will fade within a year and force us to continue to have this conversation as a community about that longer term solution set. And as George said, we are in the process of working with institutional partners like Doherty's, like Open Center, like the Nave Gallery. Susan's here. We appreciate the unique role that each of these institutions play in our civic life, our faith-based communities, and in our arts community. The public education stakeholders here have specific needs. We've heard from some of you about pick up and drop off, and so we want to work through those processes. That needs more time, and we're looking and having those meetings, doing those analyses, and trying to figure out a respectful and responsible management strategy to make sure that everybody comes out of this hole. And frankly, our designers are still working through the alternatives for protected bike infrastructure, how you cross the street, how you make a left-hand turn, how snow and ice is plowed. There are technical details that we all need to continue working through. That work is underway. And last but not least, definitely want to point out that larger ecosystem of mobility. Many of you have emailed us and said at meetings like this, hey, you've got Broadway, just a block away, you've got bike lanes, and yes, they are traditional 5-foot bike lanes kind of inside the parking in both directions. People have asked us how that fits in. I would argue that we need to be having this conversation in a larger geography about College Avenue, about Collins Street, about Broadway. So Brian, is that our next slide? Do you want to? Last but not least, parking data, right? We have told you that we will count cars, we will continue to count utilization and understand block by block, season by season, where our parking utilization is more or less substantial. And our preliminary results here have shown that block from the Rotary to Packard is fundamentally different than from Packard to Curtis and Curtis to North. You folks know this, particularly those of you who live on the Boulevard or on side streets just off the Boulevard. It is not a monolith, and human behavior on different blocks needs to inform our customized strategy for how we keep people safe. So again, block 1, less than 50% utilization, according to the data we've been collecting. Block 2, 60% Adam, 65%. Block 3, 75% utilization. So this is an ongoing process. We will have committed ourselves to continue to measure. And again, we're out there at midnight, folks. We're out there at dinner time. We're out there crack the dawn. We're out there on the weekends because we truly want to diagnose and understand how the Boulevard functions. Now, as we start kind of winding this portion down, many of you have also asked us, well, gosh, is there anything that we can do that's kind of an incremental step to honor what we're hearing about people's concern with parking resources and people's legitimate concerns with bicycle safety? And the mayor has directed our staff to start sharpening our pencils and think about whether there's an experimental version that can try to be a little bit more of all things to all people. So here is the general experimental alternative that we are working through right now. You'll notice that both sides of parking are preserved in this scheme. 2 lanes of motor vehicle travel, a buffer with plastic flex post for physical protection, and in one direction of curbside bicycle travel. Again, that is going to be better than the default plan for some of you, and it's going to be worse than the idealized version for some of you. However, again, we're trying to broker compromise and work through a legitimate and respectful community process. And frankly, I'm excited about exploring this. We have technical work to do, and the mayor has given us the directive to advance this design and see if we can experiment with it this fall. More to come on that. And let me briefly introduce Brian Postlewaite, our Assistant Director of Engineering, who serves as Project Manager for the utility work. Thanks, Brian.
I just have something really brief to point out. I've been to all these meetings these past few months, and one of the things that cropped up is, I think somebody, I forget who it was, brought up Broadway. And that really grabbed something, not because Broadway in and of itself is special, because it reminded me with the engineering department that we have a number of streets in West Somerville that we're working on over the next few years. Holland Street is on our 5-year plan. Church Street, College Street is on our 5-year plan. And we want to look to see how those interact with what is going on Powder House Boulevard. So we're using this as an opportunity to look at this a little bit more regional and a little bit more holistically, so that when things change on Holland, when things change on College, how does that in turn impact Powder House Boulevard and vice versa? And also look at how people migrate via motorists, via cyclists, via pedestrian, how we navigate this part of the city, so that we are making the right decisions, that we're making the right complete streets at the right location, so that we don't just have single complete streets here and there, we have a complete neighborhood from a mobility standpoint. And the last thing is that we have one other element that we're working on right now, and that's Powder House Square. Powder House Square at the Rotary, and we're looking at how to reorganize the traffic there, because it's a challenging intersection for everybody, and it has one of the higher accident crash rates of the city. So I know Brad has some more information on that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And again, you all ask good and correct questions, and one of the good and correct questions is a low-stress facility that's good for people of all ages and all abilities to ride a bike, from the youngest to the oldest, from the most experienced to the novice. It dumps you into the extremely stressful Powder House Rotary. Is clearly not consistent with our community's ambitions of a useful, safe network. And so we have been talking with you all at Resistat in Ward 6 and Ward 7 for about 18 months now. We've been advancing a design, working with licensed engineers, because the Rotary is pretty darn complicated. And yet we are, I think, experiencing some real community consensus that the status quo is not working for anybody. Let's try something different. Let's splash some paint out there, and let's see if we can make this thing safer and more efficient for everybody, no matter how you get around. So the mayor has asked us again to kind of accelerate this, to finish the design process, and to start experimenting this fall. And I'm thrilled, because frankly, this is a problem that could have been addressed 20 years ago. We just never had the stars align. I feel like the stars are starting to align, and I'm excited to attack this problem. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, on the other end of the geography, people have also asked the identical question. Yeah, my kid swims at the pool at Dilworth Stadium. We recreated the wonderful parklands along the Alewife Brook, riding a bicycle and pretending that it's safe or effective to cross at the crappy, excuse my French, blinking yellow light to get you across Route 16. It's clearly, again, not what we want in terms of accessible community. So we have been working to try to reimagine that kind of hybrid, high-speed Rotary that causes all of us, I think, to shiver a little bit as we enter it, particularly after driving. You just don't know who's going to yield, who's not going to. We know that speeds on the parkway are way too high. And in the same way that the high street light starts to kind of intercept some of those higher speed movements, that a second traffic signal here could really start to meter out those flows, reduce some of the artificial congestion at Broadway, at Johnny's, at the grocery store, and also provide for cleaner and safer crossings for pedestrians or people on bikes to access the wonderful paths that go all the way out to the Mystic Lakes. So we're excited about this. This is underway. We've got some conceptual designs. We're working for some grant funding to rebuild this. It is owned and operated by the DCR, the state agency that controls the parklands. So the city of Somerville does not have the ability to unilaterally change this intersection, but we're working with the DCR, and I'm frankly pretty optimistic that we're going to get there, in part because we're working in partnership with the Somerville Housing Authority through their Affordable Housing Modernization Program. So bookends on the Boulevard. Boulevard's 3/4 of a mile. We got these super high stress Rotary style intersections on either end. And we want to address all of them, just like Ryan mentioned, with that larger network of the local streets. Okay? So I think that starts to bring us to our conclusion, George. Thanks, and I'll leave you all time for discussion.
All right. So we've got the schedule slide. If you can flip one more, I think. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts before we head into the conversation, just to summarize where we are, where we're going, and what's happening next. In the upcoming weeks, we are going to have the opportunity to, and the need to get markings down the pavement. So in a permanent, long-term sort of way, we're going to set down the crosswalks and the stop bars. We're going to paint what Brad showed with the single direction bike lane. My understanding is it switches the sides of the street so that you're in a bike lane on the uphill side, and you're using sharrows connected in with the traffic on the downhill side, so where it reaches a hilltop here, it switches sides in terms of which side the bike lane is. What that also does is it reduces the travel lanes, which on this street for cars have been about 13 feet to about 10 feet, which has been our standard for the fundamental goal of trying to keep traffic slow and keep traffic in a neighborhood circumstance rather than using our neighborhood streets as a speedway. That will have significant benefits to us by doing that, and that's the reason why we feel as a minimum safety standard we need to get the 10-foot lanes. That leaves you the 5 feet left. It makes a lot of sense to get those bike lanes in and do that as a basic starting point. It doesn't take away any parking. We're going to look over the course of the fall at the possibility of testing the idea, again, testing with paint or cones or some strategy, moving the parking out and doing that one direction bike lane as being more protected. It squeezes the dimensions on the lanes a little bit, so we have to do a little bit more study, and it has some impacts if you want to take left turns on the bike lane. You can't get past a car on one side, get to a street on another. So we're trying to work out what it would take and what it might involve to do that. But we're going to look at the possibility of doing that. Again, these are all experimental testing. We come out, we study, we look at the same thing with the four-way stop signs. The idea of doing the all-way stop down here instead of the traffic light is something we want to study and see how it works, especially as we head into the school year. We're going to continue to count cars. We're going to do it when Tufts is in session, when school's in session here. We're going to look at the impacts of what happens when there's a large wake or funeral at Doherty's. We're going to look at where things are going. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk more in the fall. We're also going to work to answer a lot of the questions that you asked at the May meeting. There were a number of questions. Can we put bike lanes up by the sidewalks? Can we look at the possibility of having more parking in certain spots on certain side streets? Can we address timing and schedules of what happens with certain circumstances with the funeral home? Every one of those things we're going to look at, and our hope is that we come back in the fall meeting, we're able to talk more about those and answer more questions about those. If you have questions about those tonight, I will try my best, but the answer is probably we don't have an answer about that right now. We're working towards our fall meeting to do that and to share more about where we're going in the long term with that. So as Brad explained, our long-term city strategy moves us towards the Vision Zero solution, but at the same time, we're in a position where each of these situations and circumstances are unique. On a street like Broadway, over by Trump Field, where we have a lot of width, we have a lot of ability to do things where we can easily manage multiple users and institutions and activities all at once. Here, certainly, we have discovered and we found and continue to listen to the challenges that make this a lot more challenging place to be able to serve every user in a 40-foot right-of-way and make sure that we allocate every inch of that 40-foot width of pavement the best we can. So we're going to study results, we're going to study solutions, we're going to look at the questions raised, and there will be a fall meeting, there will be additional meetings after the fall meeting to work through proposals. The key reason we wanted to make sure to check in with everyone tonight is we are going to go out and paint something. It isn't necessarily something that one person may say, this is my first choice or this is my second choice, but it is something that allows us to continue the conversation going and creates a safer situation than we've ever had out on the street before with the speed humps, the stop signs, and the narrower lanes with one direction of bike lane. So I'm going to turn it over to Toby. Toby's going to manage the process of questions and comments, and I will, with the technical staff here, to work to help facilitate that.
So let me just check in. Is there anyone who wants to speak or ask a question that did not put their name on a note card? Okay, so a handful. So raise your hands, and Justin, would you mind coming and just bringing a note card to any folks who haven't put their name down? So yeah, we have at least an hour now for comments and questions. And just at the outset, I want to note that we know that this is an issue that people are really passionate about, that there are strong opinions on, and that is great. The city staff here are ready to listen to your comments, to answer your questions. We're excited and happy that there's this many folks who are this passionate about what's going on Powder House Boulevard. At the same time, if we're going to get through this, we kind of need to work together to make it work. So I'm just going to suggest a couple of ground rules for the room to help us manage this comment period effectively. So first of all, we want to encourage you to ask great questions, offer thoughtful comments. We also want to suggest to please bring your passion to the topic, not to any individuals who are speaking or any staff members up here. And so focus that passion on the topic. And please, when folks are speaking, respect their opportunity to speak, even if you disagree. That's their chance to offer their comment or ask their questions, and you would want folks to respect you if you were doing the same. So please respect folks when they're speaking. And also, just because I've counted the comment cards, it looks like there's at least, I counted the number of folks who are interested in speaking, it looks like there's at least 30 or so, which is a lot. So in the interest of managing time, just so that we can have everyone have a chance to contribute, we're going to be doing some time management tactics. And I'm just going to let George speak about exactly how that works, because he's quite familiar with it.
So I asked the team to borrow the timer that we use for planning and zoning board meetings in the event that we had so many people that wanted to speak that we wanted to make sure to get through it before they turn the air conditioning and the lights off in here. And by the way, the air conditioning really is on a timer, so we need to keep ourselves on a timer to not get all too warm in here. So the general strategy here is this little timer here. We're going to put a 2-minute timer on. People can comment. When there's 30 seconds, so this light turns green when you start talking. There's 30 seconds left, it turns yellow, and it beeps once. The beep is loud. Do not let it scare you. You still have 30 seconds left to talk. Don't stop when you hear that first beep. It just is a warning that you're 3/4 of the way through your time. When it reaches 2 minutes, the red light turns on and it starts beeping, and at that time it doesn't stop beeping. And I think at that point you'll know that means your time is up. If you've got 3 or 4 more words to say to wrap up, that's reasonable, but that really helps us be able to let everybody get a chance to share some concise thoughts on what they want to share with us. If you just have a question, just ask the question. Do it as quickly as you can. We'll do our best to answer it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, George. So here's how this is going to work. I've collected these note cards. I've shuffled them so the order is random. Okay. So I'm going to read out names. I'm also going to let you know if you're on deck so you can prepare. And if you ask a question, we'll probably just take a couple of questions before we turn to the staff to offer answers. If you have a comment, great. We'll just move on. Okay. So up first we have Mary Jo Rossetti, and then on deck is Frances Lindenberger. Okay, so could staff please come around with microphones for folks? Great.
I just wanted to make a statement about the potential for a hawk traffic signal to be in front of the school here for safety. We have one in one area of the city on Beacon Street now, and Brad knows I speak with him frequently about it. There's a resident who's been sending videos quite frequently that it's really not working. It's not efficient. And we've had a police officer go on record as agreeing. And then we had this horrible death in East Somerville recently, and it was a hawk signal, and it's been suggested that the driver said he didn't see the light. So I am not a fan of hawk signals based on 2 stories I know in Somerville. I'm not an expert, but I just wanted to go on record as being concerned about a hawk signal.
Thank you.
Thanks for the job. Appreciate it.
Francis, and then on deck is Greg. Eli. Hi. So you'll be on deck. Oh.
And folks, tell us if the volume needs to go up or down.
Good. I just said a quick comment. I'm on that first stretch of Powder House Blvd, and I just wanted, obviously when there's a wake or funeral, there's almost no parking there, and it also floods very frequently. In fact, flooded today, and so no cars parked there were underwater today. So there was effectively no parking sort of at the street end of that or way down the block. So just to maybe be aware of that as a planning for parking. Seems like there's a lot there, but sometimes there's no one.
Okay, so, Greg, Eli, and then on deck is Leela Arnett.
Hi, I'm Greg. I just had a concern about putting in the temporary bike lanes and potential low counts of bikers when that's put in. So it's not really safe infrastructure, and I don't think people will use it as much. So I just want to make sure that that's sort of reflected when looking at that data. Second was I know in one of the previous meetings there was a note about putting in T's for on parking to encourage that. That seems like something that could be piloted very easily with this temporary paint. I was wondering if you would look into that.
Great question. Adam, do you want to talk a little bit about any of the parking tees or anything like that? Is something that we've...
Sure. So yeah, this is
People know what a parking tee is?
yeah. So yeah, that's a good place to start. So a parking tee, we don't have them in very many places in Somerville, but it is pretty intuitive. Basically, it's just a little 2-foot mark that goes about every 20 feet, which is the normal length of a traffic stall. So in a parking lane, it just kind of checks. Actually, I think in Davis Square, like in Highland Ave, for example, we have some of those. So it just more clearly delineates an average size parking space. Now, in some cases, depending on the length of the vehicle, that may or may not be the best option. But on a street like Powder House, where you generally have normal-sized sedans for the most part, that can actually be a tool that we can use effectively to more effectively manage parking, especially when you have some weird lengths between curbs. On a lot of these blocks, you have like 35, 36 street between driveways. And sometimes people use it as one space, but in some cases you can actually use it as two. So that's something that we'll be looking into as we continue our pilot. But there was a lot of interest in testing that on Powder House Boulevard, so something we're going to be taking seriously.
I just wanted to take the opportunity as we were doing responses to acknowledge Councilor Rosetti's comments on the hot signal. It is certainly something that has generated conversation at the other 2 locations we have in Somerville. And just note 2 quick things, because we are collecting information on Hawks that I think will be helpful to determine whether or not that signal type. It'll help us with understanding what's going on here. The one in Beacon Street, they're finishing up the construction work. When they finish up the construction work, we are going to do a study on the effectiveness of it. We're going to see where it's going, how it's going, how the traffic is going, and actually do actual analysis above and beyond the data that the information we've received to date from the individual who lives there. And it's a worthwhile understanding of it. We also have an ongoing investigation into what is certainly yet another very tragic pedestrian fatality, but there is still an investigation. We've heard the comment that someone didn't see the light, we're trying to figure out if the light was on, we're trying to figure out what that means. The state's doing that investigation because it's their road, but we're very interested in understanding the results of that, as well as the results of our studies on Beacon Street before. The good news is we'll have some time to have some feedback from both of those before we determine what to do. Okay, all right, so next is Leela Arnett, and after that we have Larry Mullery. So Leela, do you want to raise your hand? Great, thank you.
Can you hear me? If you really want to protect the school, the problem is coming in from the road, from North Street. People don't, it's a hill. So what happens is they really speed from North Street to up the hill without really seeing what's happening, and the same coming down. And I'm hearing that there may not be a speed bump down near North Street. There needs to be something for people when they come into Powder House, they see that this is not just a street where you can speed, because it's very tempting because of the hill. So something needs to be happening between the school and North Street. That's a real problem area for people who live there, as they do. Crossing the street is impossible. Coming out of the drive is impossible because people are really annoyed when they come out from LY Road Parkway and they see that beautiful street with that hill, and they say, here we go. So what they do is they stop speeding, and then the school is right there. So there's nothing in between. And they need to know what's happening, that they can't just speed up the hill, or down the hill for that matter, because of that light that's really attracting them. As humans, we're very attracted to green lights. Okay.
Thanks so much, and we'll
Thanks,
get a few more and
And
then.
actually, Adam, it's probably worth noting where one of the 3 speed humps, the asphalt speed humps, will be, because we've done speed studies, Lily, you're right. That is statistically one of the fastest locations on the entire boulevard. So that we've got one halfway between Dow and North.
Yes, that's right.
So that should be helpful.
Yeah.
Here's our-
It's actually worth noting. It's worth noting that you mentioned that approach. We actually have in this plan, and will be effectuated this month, 3 traffic calming interventions that will slow traffic in that direction. Number 1, we are putting in asphalt, permanent asphalt, the same speed hump configuration we had. So on the eastbound approach, before you get to the school, you have 2 speed humps you go ahead, and then a 3rd one after you pass the school. Number 2, the narrowing of the lanes, as Brad mentioned, is critical for slowing down traffic. The visual friction you have from the narrower lanes effectively makes people drive slower. And it's a psychological thing, and honestly, it's a subtle thing that will promote better behavior. If you think about the stretch from North to the Rotary, that is 0.7 miles. If you think about the difference between going 30 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour, what you gain, even assuming you had green lights and no stop sign at Packard, is 12 seconds. The difference between going 35 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour in terms of reaction time to stopping for a pedestrian is critical. And in the event of an accident, the impact is that much less. It's critical that we're shaving off even 5 miles per hour on behavior. Number 3, we're instituting the 4-way stop at Curtis, so that behavior you see when you have the green light and people smash on the gas is eradicated. So I want to point out you are exactly right on the behavior of existing motorists, but what we're doing this month significantly curtails that.
Thanks, Rich.
Just want to introduce yourself so folks don't know who you are.
I'm Rich Race, the Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management, and work with Brian in the engineering office to actually build this stuff.
My apologies for not introducing you as a beginner.
And on deck is John Reynolds.
I'm Larry Maury, and I've been a resident here in Somerville for over 40 years. My wife and I have been here. She's been here longer than I have. And we live on one of the side streets up here. And my biggest concern, especially when I came to the last meeting, was the fact that at that time there was talk that parking was going to be taken away on one side of the street. And that caused an uproar. For anybody that was here, you know what I mean. And it sounds to me like the city has listened to that and taken that in consideration, because that's really important around here, that they have parking on both sides of the street and not to take it away. The reason for that is for anybody that lives on a side street here, you know what it's like, especially when Tufts is in season, okay? When the students come back, parking is so limited around here, okay? And what would happen is the people that would, have their spaces taken away would all try to park on the side streets. And there just isn't enough room on the side streets. Also, you've got the other concern with the street cleaning, okay? What happens on the boulevard with street cleaning, with the bike lanes?
So is that a question?
That's a question, yeah.
And snow emergency.
And snow emergencies as well.
Well, that's what we'll have every day if they take it.
So, thanks, Larry. And the folks, we're doing great so far. We're trying to respect folks' time. I would ask that, again, we continue this, civic dialogue, rounds of applause sometimes cause the temperature of the room to spike up a little bit. So I totally hear that somebody's going to say one thing and somebody's going to say a different thing. We're going to see rounds of applause. I'm not sure if that's the healthiest way for us to continue over the next hour. However, again, everybody's voice is going to be heard, and we respect what you're saying. In terms of management, Larry, our DPW team has gotten much better about snow clearing for dedicated bike lanes down Beacon Street, Webster Avenue have been some of our kind of test cases. The street sweeping stuff is not only for clean and safe activities, but also for managing our stormwater assets. We do have to continue to sweep our streets. But again, those are part of the stewardship and management program elements that we're trying to describe a little bit. So again, we've got months ahead of us where we'll be working through those details.
And Brad, if I may just add, one of the things that happens when you look at the issue of removing parking is you may say that it works in a steady state situation, but it doesn't work in an extreme state situation. And we understand that, and that's part of the study work that we still have to do. So if we remove parking on one side of Powder House Boulevard and then we turn the other side of Powder House Boulevard into a street sweeping situation on that particular day, now we're parking on the other side of the boulevard on that day, we have to be able to measure that just as well as we measure other things. We do understand that those are one of the things we're measuring. Adam and some of the folks in the transportation team have had some really interesting challenges with the parking crunches created down by where we all work at City Hall since we closed the City Hall parking lot to do the high school construction. And that's kind of one of the challenges we deal with. Like you have to measure. You also have to measure on street sweeping day because that's the day that has impact. So there are things you can do. There are discussions about timing of when street sweeping occurs and how you break it up and how many stretches you do. So there's more study to be done. I think it's a great question, and when we come back in the fall meeting, we should talk about this more. Thanks.
So maybe it's John is next.
Yep, so John is next, and then on deck is Lindsay Sudbury. Want to raise your hand, Lindsay, so I know where you are? Lindsay here? Okay, so then on deck would be Laura Evans. Okay, great.
First, I just want to say that the tone of this meeting and the way this meeting is being run is significantly better than the previous meeting, so I applaud the city for making that happen. And I say that as a preface because, I might be among people who don't share my point of view, so I do appreciate not getting booed off the stage. I live a pretty car-light lifestyle. I get around by bike with my daughter primarily, and part of the reason why I moved back to Somerville is because it's a community that seems to support that. I lived in Somerville a little over 10 years ago. I then moved to South Boston, and you want to talk about a pretty unfriendly place to bike, that's a good example. And I chose to move back to Somerville because I enjoyed my time here and I felt like things were actually moving in the right direction for the life that I want to live. I live on one of those side streets that's just off of Powder House Blvd. You can come and park on my street. There is a ton of parking. I live on College Hill Road. More than 50% of that street is open every day. So I do think there is a surplus of parking in the area. That's my anecdotal experience. I think the council back that up. And I want to echo the fact that I don't think extreme scenarios should dictate that every day. 1 or 2 days of snow on a given year should not put me and my daughter at risk 364 other days of the year. I need protection when I'm riding with my daughter and my bike. I don't like riding in mixed traffic. I currently avoid Powder House Boulevard to the best that I can. Unfortunately, it's pretty hard to do because I cross that street every day. It goes to many of the places that I want to go. I can't just jump over to Broadway because Broadway, the bike lanes only go from Packard Ave to the Circle. They don't go all the way to Teal. We hear that comment over and over again that, just use the ones on Broadway. Well, they're not contiguous. They're not protected. It's a totally different thing and totally different experience. So I'm really looking forward to the city looking at this as sort of a regional thing. I pitched that idea to, to the people in the planning department. Said, I really want to see this be a regional effort on all the urban arterial roads. And I'll wrap up there, but thanks for hosting this meeting. I do appreciate it.
Thanks so much for respecting the time as well.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. So Laura, and then Mark Chase is on deck. Mark, you want to raise your hand from the back?
First, I want to echo what Mary Jo said about the hawk signal. I'm not convinced they're appropriate for dense urban areas. Sorry, I'm not convinced the hawk signal is appropriate for dense urban areas where there's lots of pedestrians, as we have seen, unfortunately, in tragic situations. And secondly, I want to talk about very, very near-term plan for the street. It was paved in the last week of June. We have had 5 weeks of the street being a speedway. We have all those nice speed feedback signs, so I just go out every time I walk down the street, I go and I stand there, and my neighbors, I'm sure, all think that I'm crazy because I watch the speed feedback signs, and you can see that it's full of cars that are going 30, 35 miles per hour right in front of the school. It's a 20-mile-an-hour zone. They're going towards the speed limit, and you know as well as I do that that's the speed where pedestrians die. I know thermoplastic is hard, you have to schedule crews, it has to be the right phase of the moon, but I want to know why haven't we done anything temporary on the street? Why hasn't DPW put down barrels or temporary striping or flux posts or the temporary speed bumps? Why has none of that been done for these last 5 weeks?
Great, Laura, thanks. We're going to take a couple and then make sure that your question gets answered.
Thanks, Laura.
So Mark Chase is up, and then on deck is Alex Anderson.
Thank you. I work at Tufts. I'm a lecturer in transportation planning and work a lot actually on parking issues. I'm a bicyclist. I really hope that as we explore the options going forward, that the city looks really carefully at how we manage parking on the streets, and that if any parking is removed, that the city has a really good plan that passes a sniff test that 95% of the people can be like, yes, this can work, and we're not going to be in a situation where I'm driving around looking for a parking space and it's taking me too long to find one. So that's my only comment. I really hope that as you make these proposals that you address parking and that you look at other cities in the U.S. that have managed their parking better than we have. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So let's give the city folks a chance to respond to Laura's question about why has there not been temporary striping or barrels or other measures?
So a couple things are going on here. When we repay the street, as we discussed earlier, it takes about a month, sometimes longer, especially in the middle of hot summer, which we've been experiencing lately, for the pavement to basically cure so that the thermoplastic and the paints can adhere to it without damaging the pavement for the long term. So we don't want to come back here and repave our streets prematurely. The thought of having construction barrels out is not the appropriate response. What we've been looking into is putting out the temporary pylon bollards that we put out the other day. I think your point is good, and we probably should have looked at that earlier. But we did it when we thought of it, and we acted on it very quickly. The other element is the temporary speed humps. The installation practice of those is to open into the pavement, and in doing that further damages the pavement. So in the interest of having an asset, a pavement that actually lasts, we didn't want to be crumbling up the pavement right after we paved it. And we were actively working to get a crew out here to put in the speed humps earlier. Crew times is not something that we can control directly. But we have been getting commitments that they should be out here in the next week.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so next up is Alex Anderson, and on deck is Matt Carr.
Hello, everybody. Thanks. My name is Alex Anderson. I'm a resident of Ward 7, just live off Broadway. I've been to all these meetings. Thank you for humoring me and my baby earlier in the meeting. Apologies for being disruptive. I do want to echo John's comment. First, thanks to the city for facilitating a great meeting, and thanks for everybody in the room, many of whom were here last time. And I think the tenor of this room is much different than it was last time. And I think that's good, because we're all neighbors and hopefully friends. I want to be your friend. Today, I'm a car driver. I got here by car. My wife met me by Uber, and then they drove home, and I'm going to walk home. Most other times I'm a bike rider, but I'm on Powder House on my bike, on a car every week, in every kind of. In any way, you can figure out my friends live in Powder House, so I'm a multimodal person. A couple of things I wanted to note is I think it's really important for us all to recognize that every street in Somerville, whether it's Powder House or the streets that we live on, are public resources, and cars are private property. Bikes are private property. Storing, perpetuating private property on public resources is not a sustainable way to have a community that works. And that's especially true when we know that there are people who die when things go wrong. And I recognize that from a parking perspective, it can feel like a pinch when there's street cleaning or snow emergencies or parking removal. But what we're talking about is the distribution of public resources, not the taking away of private resources. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because there are, from the anecdotal counts that some of the bike committee has taken place, and early counts that the city has done, there appears to be a surplus of space in the community, whether that's on Powder House and side streets or other places. So I do think it's important that the city finds a solution to get protected bike lanes on Powder House Boulevard, because it's one of the least serviced roads in terms of safe infrastructure that can connect Winchester into Somerville, Alewife into Somerville, Medford into Somerville. It's a really, really important piece of a wider regional network. A couple of other comments I do want to make in terms of, that got my 30 seconds, okay, well, I'll just make them later. Anyway, there's enough space, we can figure it out together, and say hi, when I'm on my bike, please don't know.
Thanks, Alex. This one's probably better, honestly.
Thanks. And Susan Barstow is on that.
So as to pick up kind of where Alex left off, that public space has value. You know, everyone pays $40 a year to park, but it's all you can eat. I would love to have a $40 all you can eat for legal seafood that lasts me all year. That'd be pretty excellent. I would fight to keep that. But the real question I have for the city here is, how much does it cost to provide a parking space for a year? You can answer that online. I know the number is in the hundreds of dollars a year category. The pavement, operations, policing, snow clearance, striping, it all adds up. So you're granting, you're subsidizing, you're encouraging people to drive by paying them to store their vehicle. And what I would like to see from a standpoint of equity is making that same dollar grant to people who take transit, to people who bike, to people who walk. Households that don't get a parking permit should be able to apply and say, give me that $400 a year, $500, whatever it is. I'll trust your numbers, although there are some very reputable studies that put it in an $800 range, not even including the opportunity cost of the taxable land. Grant that money to people who take the other alternatives, and you're going to see more people taking the bus, more people walking. Some people are going to divest of their automobile and say, gee, I can afford to take transit now because I'm getting an equitable share of the city's tax resources, because you're giving away free land. Thank you.
Okay, Susan.
And on deck is
Susan Curry.
Thanks. I'm Susan Bursler. I'm the director of the Nave Gallery, which is in the Clarendon Hill Presbyterian Church, like less than a block away. We've been there for 15 years. We're a nonprofit art space. We change our shows probably once a month, maybe a little longer sometimes. We have events, we have receptions, we have music, we have poetry. We've done a heck of a lot of fundraising for the Somerville Homeless Coalition, which is our community project that we like to support. For me, this is about diversity and accessibility. If we had better public transportation, I wouldn't have a problem. But I know we've been there 15 years. We'll have to close the gallery if we lose 50% of the parking. Our relationship with our neighbors is really important to us. And already when we have a big event, we have to be very careful to make sure that people park in the parking lot who can. But the truth is not everybody can. Not everybody can walk from this parking lot to the church. If you have mobility issues, that's a problem. And I can speak from the perspective of a non-car person. I've never owned a car in my life. I was a bicyclist my whole life until I started having knee operations. I get around by bus, I get around by walking, and our public transportation, quite frankly, sucks, particularly to get to right here. And that's not even talking about the 89 and why sometimes it goes to Clarendon and sometimes it goes to Davis and all the other stuff that no one can ever figure out. But, you know, we're doing the Somerville Toy Camera Festival. It's the 6th year, and it's in 3 galleries: so Washington Street, Brick Bottom, and the Nave Gallery, and also the Griffin Museum of Photography in Winchester. We had over 100 artists last year from 30-some states in 8 countries. People come from out of this country to visit us on that festival. And they need to get from us to Brick Bottom to Washington Street. Quite frankly, it's impossible right now with all the bridges down. So, you know, we really will have to close. And it's really sad, and I love this community, and I really don't want to leave.
Thanks, Susan, much appreciated. Susan?
Susan Curry, and on deck is Jason John.
Hi, I'm Susan Curry. I live in the neighborhood. I run in the neighborhood, and I do commute a couple times a week to the Back Bay. So I'm a cyclist. We own one car and we have a driver. And I take all kinds of buses and public transportation. So anyway, I feel like the solution that you came up with is a pretty good compromise. It preserves all the parking for Emily's Church and the funeral home. I know if you don't live here, you sort of feel like it's weird, sticker, the funeral home parking, but it is legit. Having said that, I do think this is a good compromise. I do think the solution for the protected bike lanes is Broadway, because a good portion of Broadway is wide. You can easily get 2 lanes of traffic, parking on both sides and a bike lane. I do realize, as this gentleman said right here, once you get to Teal Square, it gets narrower and it's not as friendly. So the solution is to make Broadway better, rather than this 0.7 mile stretch, the road to nowhere, having dedicated bike lanes. Because if you go, so I frequently bike home with a gentleman that lives in Winchester by Mystic Lakes, and so what happens when you get past North Street? You can't go to Route 16, so you have to go on the sidewalk, you have to take North Street to Boston Ave, etc. So if you can take Broadway all the way past the Stop and Shop, then the cycling becomes much better. So I think that's the solution, is to make Broadway from East Somerville all the way to the Arlington border much more friendly.
Thanks, Susan. Jason is up. I just want to check in quickly before the meeting. Does the city staff want to respond to anything that's been mentioned in the last few comments? Or are we going to keep moving? We're good right now. Okay, great. Okay, so Jason, you're up, and on deck is Warren Dew, I believe. Warren Dew.
Hi, I live in this neighborhood. I've lived in Somerville for 15 years. I've never owned a car. I bike through Somerville every day, and I have to say that avoiding dying from cars is exhausting, and I'm highly supportive of protected bike lanes and both directions.
Warren is up, and next up is Gary Goodman.
Okay, so I live on Powder House Blvd. I moved in December 1990, so I've been there almost 30 years now. And before that, in the 1980s, I biked to work almost every day for 3 years, so I understand that side of the picture as well. I have 3 children, ages 11, 9, and 6, who I'm bringing up in Somerville. I think that one of the issues about the parking hasn't been covered, which is the safety considerations. You need parking on both sides of the street, or else people have to be constantly crossing the street to get to their car. And that provides a lot more opportunities for accidents like the one that killed somebody out here. You know, you have to walk your toddler all the way down to the crosswalk to get them across to your car or whatever. So I think that from a pedestrian safety consideration, which is supposedly the first consideration, that's a strong argument for keeping parking on both sides of the street. The other thing I'd like to say is that, having had toddlers, bicycles can be as dangerous to toddlers as cars are. And in fact, when I walk the toddlers to Kendall Square, I'm sorry, not Kendall Square, Davis Square, you know, cars are generally good about slowing down and stopping, bicycles are not. So I'm concerned about having a bicycle lane in between the parked car and the sidewalk, because that's a concern for taking kids into the car. And I also think it's a little bit problematic for the bicyclists, because in a residential street like this, you may be loading your car for half an hour in preparation for a trip or something like that, and that's going to be a problem for bicyclists. That's a different consideration than you have on a commercial street like Broadway. But bottom line is, I really think, oh, and one other thing is that as a bicyclist, I found it much safer to use side streets than main streets. So I think the solution to take advantage of side streets might be a good idea.
Thank you, Warren. Appreciate it. All right, Gary Goodwin is up, and next up after Gary is Chris Duan.
Basically, I got a few questions on that four-way stop that you want to test. You're going to turn around and you're going to put traffic back past Dow Street. So I'm going to have to hire a detail to get out of my driveway. And your pedestrians on the four-way stop like they do at Packard Avenue, they just keep walking. Right now, at least 50% of them press the button to have, and wait for the crossing of pedestrians and all that kind of stuff. That one way, you know, one car down, you're going to set traffic all the way back. The other thing is, what is this hot light? If it doesn't, when you push the button, just turn solid red to stop the cars, that ain't what you need. You just need somewhere, a light out there, that you push the button, wait for the red light, the cars will stop on a solid red light, and then you cross the street. I've lived in this area for 48 years, I've lived in Somerville 71. I've ridden a bike when I was younger that I can't do now all over the city. You know, we used to have, the police officers used to have safety programs for bike riders. Maybe some of these bike riders might need that if they're a little afraid on the street. So can you tell me what that hot light is, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to, let me thank you first of all, let me address both of your points. Starting with the four-way stop, I think the good news about the four-way stop is we're going to put bags over the traffic lights and we're going to put up stop signs and we're going to come out and we're going to look and we're going to study and we're going to see what's going on. If you see the traffic backing up to your driveway, please call us. We want to come out, we want to see what's happening. Please, we would like you to do that. Because that's the way we learn whether or not we're making things better or worse.
My car out on the street, because I won't be able to get out of my driveway.
All right, I would like to see pictures of what the differences are. That's sometimes the only way we're able to find out the answers to these things is by trying them and seeing what happens. I want to explain the hot signal because I realize we touched on it. We may have gone deeper into it at the previous meeting, but it is worth explaining. It is something that has been approved by the Federal Highway Administration. I have seen it successfully work in urban places, in places like Washington, D.C. We do only have two of them here in Somerville. One was put up on a state road and one of them was put on Beacon Street. It is something that's interesting to see. One of the things that's valuable about the hot signal is that the transportation rules allow you to place one in a location without necessarily having as much traffic and as much activity as you need to do a full red, yellow, green stoplight, a full stoplight. But what a hot signal does is it stays dark, so there's no lights on unless somebody pushes the button. But when somebody does push the button, it flashes a yellow light at you, and then I believe it blinks two red lights, and then it puts two big red balls of light right up in front of you. And when those red lights are red, you are supposed to come to a complete stop, just like as if you're at any other red traffic light. And there are signs on the hot signal to explain how that works. One of the things that's a little different about it is once you clear the intersection, the reds start to flash. If there's no pedestrians there, driver is allowed to proceed at that point, then it turns off, and it's basically no longer on again until somebody pushes the button. So much like the flashing beacon out here, if you don't push the button, no lights are on. But unlike the flashing beacon out here, if you do push the button, it turns red, and it means you're supposed to stop. You were supposed to come to a complete stop when that light is red and yield completely to the pedestrians. So it is somewhat of a hybrid between, a flashing light circumstance and a full red, yellow, green stoplight. But it does have that full red. And as I said, we're not immediately choosing to do it here. I think it will help to have the information from how things are going on Beacon Street and the feedback from the accident report on the state highway to understand how things are going here. I have seen them successfully in other places. But I'm not sure here tonight I can tell you it's the right answer for Powder House Boulevard. It's something we're looking at.
Pedestrian, when I grew up, it was red and yellow light.
I remember the old
yellow, and you knew it was pedestrian.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Chris
I'll
Warren,
just update myself, I guess.
and on deck is Brandon. Brandon Stafford. That's been great.
So I'm Chris Dwan, and I showed up for a traffic safety meeting rather than parking or bicycle advocacy meeting. I live just off Beacon Street, and we've been in one of these experimental zones for about the past 4 years. My experience is that the hawk signal doesn't work. Constantly changing and experimenting light patterns causes drivers to be confused. It causes things to back up. Confused drivers who are late trying to get to work or get home from work, they speed, they cut through side streets, they do crazy stuff because they're stuck. I would urge you in looking at this to think deeply, make a plan, make it consistent, make it simple. Four-way stops, everybody knows how to work those. I wish we had those on Beacon. I think we're all here for safety, and I think simple is safety, and I think speed kills. Thank you.
Okay. Brandon is up, and on deck is Nicole Bueller. Nicole, you want to raise your hand? Sure. Hey, Nicole.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon. So I live over kind of near here in Davis. I got 2 young kids. One of them, my daughter goes to the Open Center, which is the daycare down there. And so, and my son is younger, and they'll probably both end up going to school here. So I did a little calculation, and I think I have to go to Powder House Boulevard at least. I have to park or stop, somehow travel to Powder House Boulevard probably 5,000 times in the next 10 years, and then maybe up to as many as 10,000, which I'm not really looking forward to that. So I usually actually drive. I drive a car about 2/3 of the time. I drop my daughter off at the daycare at the Open Center there and pick her up usually in the afternoon. The worst it's been, and I've been doing this now for 3 years, the farthest away I've ever had to park is on Packard. Once I had to park on Ossipee when there was snow. Every other time I've parked between Curtis and Packard on Powder House, every time. So that doesn't seem that bad. I might be the only person who said like a positive thing about, hey, parking, it isn't so bad. The thing that I really don't want is I don't want my daughter, she just on Saturday learned how to ride a bike, which I'm really happy about. I really don't want her to get hit by a car. And right now when she bikes around here, 30 seconds, when she bikes around here like on Leonard Ave, on the way over here, or in Powder House, I'm always worried, she's only 3'2", and so if a car backs out over her, that would break my heart, and I really don't want that to happen. So I'd rather have safe infrastructure on the road, and I can deal with the parking loss over the next 10 years that I'll be. I mean, it's gonna suck, but I prefer that to my daughter getting crushed. Or my son, just in case.
It's a little equity there.
Probably next second.
Nicole Mueller, I believe up here on the right, and then on deck is Lily Cohen. Lily, you want to raise your hand? Great, right there.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole. I live on Powder House down here, and I'm also a biker and a driver. I'm lazy in the winter, so I take my bus. But other than that, I'm usually driving, commuting to Kendall with my 2 kids. So I do want to say, the option that you put up there, where you had the protected bike lane with the parking in between the cars and the bikers, I very much support that, and I'm excited to see how that works out in the trials. So I was pleased to see that. The one thing that I'd like to put out there is also some special consideration on the pinch points that are being created as a function of the new bump outs at all the corners. Even with the bike lane, you're forcing bikes and traffic to sort of funnel together, and even without the painting on there, it's a difficult thing to navigate. So I just wanted to say I'm cognizant of that. And the other question I have is, in the past meeting, we were talking about moving the radar detectors around to sort of keep drivers on their toes. They look very permanent. So I'm wondering if that's actually still a plan, or if that's changed. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Nicole. We'll take a couple of minutes.
Actually, before we move on to it, you worked on the permanent speed radar feedback signs with our traffic and parking group, but we also know that our police department maintains the mobile units. Can you talk a little bit about that? To Nicole's question.
Sure. So we procured, I believe it was 6
units recently, and we're going back and forth about whether or not a couple of them are mobile. You just want them to not standard signposts. We actually found that it has to be a very safe signpost because they're so heavy, special kind. So maybe not as mobile as we were hoping they would be. But we ended up going with the permanent version for the Boulevard at this time because we felt that the speeding meter would be constant. We feel that's an important street, and honestly, speeding it is higher on the Boulevard than a lot of other streets in Somerville. So we want to have that sort of constant reinforcement, collect that data. There's some research out there that shows that they lose their effectiveness over time, just like putting a police officer out there. They sort of serve the same effect. But we want to see if that actually is the case on the Boulevard. And if we need to make adjustments in the future, we will. We do have a couple of units that actually sit in a parking lane. You guys may have seen them out there in the last few months. They have messages on them. We call them barrel message boards. Those ones can also display speed as well. So if we find that it's becoming a problem, we want to work towards a place where we have a program where we have a consistent way to move those units around and sort of keep people on their toes and continue to test that out.
Okay, all right. Okay, so Lily is up over there. And on deck is Mary Morrow. May Reed here still?
Right.
Great.
Hi, I bike everywhere, and I'm here to support protected bike lanes on both sides. If we don't have protected bike lanes right away, it's just Uber parking. And that completely gets rid of the bike lane. So I think we should have protected bike lanes immediately. Also, I was wondering if the city of Progressive Somerville had any comments about manels.
Sorry, about what?
Manels. I'm noticing there's not a lot of diversity in the city representation here, and I was wondering if the city had any comments about that. But
Three
really, I
elected
care about bike lanes.
officials, the board of aldermen, the president of the council, long time ago, and the school board. All right.
Folks have heard some of our talking points about how traditional bike lanes, 5 foot, like Broadway has. Our research tends to show that users of those tend to be a little bit more homogeneous than our diverse community, and that research internationally and locally shows that when you provide protected bike lanes, the young, female, people of color disproportionately start using those facilities, and it's not such a homogeneous user group. So, again, the diversity and equity conversation is always forefront in our mind, even if the staff that you see here looks homogeneous. I agree with that point 100%.
Hi, my name is Marie, and I am a parent of 2 kids. I also live in the area. So I have been attending these meetings since my son has been here at Smile. And in September, he's going to be attending 2nd grade. I used to come to these meetings when there was maybe 10 people at these meetings talking about the safety, about the front of the school, and about the crosswalk, and what can we do. I had witnessed a child nearly getting hit in front of the school when there was snow all packed up where the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and then there's the grass area and then the road. Parents are unable to open their car door because the snow was packed there, and a child got out and nearly got hit by it was a painting van. And since then, I have been attending the meetings, and there has always been discussions about the front of the school and making it safe for children to exit the cars. And I'm very frustrated because I had emailed many city officials, and I had emails before when they were doing all the redoing the sidewalks, and I had noticed that they're putting in the dirt again in between the sidewalk and the road, that they were putting, again, the grassy area, when I felt it was discussed that we were doing everything for our children's safety so they would be able to get out of a car, onto a sidewalk, and then get into school safely, and not getting onto the road. And I was just wondering what has happened with that plan. The schools, really quickly, there are 7 schools around the city of Somerville, and Brown, Kennedy, I've actually printed all of their Google Maps, and every one of them is surrounded by a nice drop-off zone where children are not getting out into grass, where there's dog poop or snow. The snow was a major issue this year. And I think maybe a meeting last year, the mayor was here and he also said, hey, there is snow, and that night he cleared the trucks were here at 10 o'clock at night because my mom was on Dow Street. The mayor had all the snow taken, and that's just one big concern of mine, that it wasn't noticed or taken care of. And then two more things.
Sorry. Just in the interest of time, if you have additional comments, please, we invite you to write them on the comment sheets, but just be fair to everyone.
Okay.
But we'll give you a response on your question now. So there's a question here about the drop-off zone for the school. Children having to get out on grass, snow, and the status of any plan to address it.
Brian, there's more concrete than there was previously, right? And it's not as much as you'd asked for here. I hear you. But we added a couple panels, right?
So yes, during the construction project, we were looking at areas that we can increase the amount of pavement adjacent to the curb line. The balancing act here is that Powder House Boulevard, one of its key features is a planted zone in front of both the school and the remainder of the boulevard. So we need to balance those two efforts from the city and from the school. What we've looked at is the key areas where there is drop-off in front of the school, which is a similar size zone as other schools in the city. And what we looked at is increasing the amount of panels right in front of the school. There is an existing tree well that we had to preserve, but we increased in that location right at the crosswalk so that we can have an area that is controlled by the crossing guard, and also provides an area for students, especially in the winter, to be able to exit the region.
The concrete that you had increased was just in front of the sidewalk. There's one spot that you had increased, but a car cannot park there because it states no parking is for buses, like school buses.
So Mary, just we're not going to have a
back and forth. Okay, sorry.
One comment, but I do want to say you're very welcome to continue following up with staff, submit comments. You don't have time to say everything that you're interested in. Okay, but just to be fair to everyone. Okay?
I will. Sorry, I'm just thinking about kids' safety, and that's why I was here.
Of course, absolutely. Okay, so up now is Ken Carlson, and on deck is Leiron Viton.
Hi, I'm Ken Carlson, 10-year resident of Somerville. I don't live in this ward, but I'm the former chair of the Somerville Bike Committee and member of the Bike Committee. The Bike Committee has been working very closely with neighbors, residents, and business owners in West Somerville, trying to create safer places for people to get around by all roads. I'd like to say that we in the Bike Committee highly recommend protected bike lanes on important corridors, such as Broadway, such as Powder House Boulevard, Elm Street, and other streets in the city, to try to keep people safe as they commute, as they choose to commute by bike from West Somerville into Cambridge and Somerville and Boston. I'd like to say that the Bike Committee itself, as well as members of the bike community, are very disappointed in the current plan of the striped bike lane on Powder House Boulevard. We highly prefer protected bike lanes, so I'm happy to see the proposal for a protected bike lane on one side. That is a positive step, but we really would like to see protected bike lanes in both directions. So we look forward to the city doing further studying. We look forward to the city doing parking studies and proposing a citywide parking management plan to try to come up with smart ways to look at parking and keeping people moving safely throughout the city. And we strongly recommend that the city adhere to Vision Zero, climate forward policies, and think about reducing carbon footprint so all of our residents and keeping residents safe. So, thanks.
You're not next, Mrs. Newby?
Yeah, Leiron is up here, and then on deck is Rachel Stewart. Sure. Okay, great.
Thank you. My name is Leiron Viton. I live here at Ward 7 on Broadway, next to Packard. I have sent my kids here since they were in kindergarten. My daughter is now in 5th grade. My son is entering 2nd grade, and I'm serve on the board here at the West Somerville Neighborhood School PTA, and I'll be continuing to do that for the next couple of years. I've also been attending these meetings, and I just want to thank you for listening. And I've noticed over the last year and a half, you bring something, we respond, you adjust. And I just want to recognize that and thank you for listening. It's really clear. So, you know, my kids also learned to ride their bikes fairly recently, I'm embarrassed to say. And, you know, I'm excited, they're excited to be on their bikes and come here to the school, ride the neighborhood. So, additional bike infrastructure that protects them makes me, as a resident, feel better. I also walk a lot. I ride my bike when I can and drive when I have to. So we're a multimodal family. But, you know, and this isn't the first night I've heard this idea that Powder House is a road to nowhere. I don't quite get that. I feel like we are at a destination right now. This is an important centerpiece of the community. And having infrastructure for people to get here is important. So I'm happy to see your temporary fix. I think it acknowledges the feedback, and it's a good compromise. So again, thank you. I would like to see a raised table if you don't do the hawk, based on the feedback. I know it's something you've been batting around. The hawk was addressed as something that would be in place of a raised table. If you don't do the hawk, please consider the raised table. Thank you.
Rachel was up here, and then on deck is Tanya S. over here.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I, like Brad, live on West Adams right here. I have 3 children. This is my youngest. 2 of them go to school here. One is 6, one is 4. Like the 4-year-old will be here in the fall. We ride our bikes on Powder House every day. That's how we get places from this part of town to this school, to their camp at Nathan Tubbs Park, and I can't ride with them on the street in an unprotected lane. And I don't feel comfortable having them and me and her on the sidewalk with pedestrians. That's not comfortable for anybody. But in a protected lane, especially in a 2-way protected lane, because of that extra width for passing, I can have them in the road with me. They can learn proper bike etiquette, and we can get, once the rotary is hopefully done, we can get from here all the way up Broadway, protected in a safe manner. And I just think that's super exciting, and it connects this whole section of Somerville that often feels really disconnected from the rest, at least for those of us who don't drive. It's hard to get over there right now safely, and this would make a huge difference. And it means my kids could potentially bike protected lanes to high school someday. And I think that's really important. And the only other thing that I feel like hasn't been mentioned at all, Alex did a great job mentioning the private property stored on public rights of way. All or nearly all of the homes in this area have driveways. And I think we should be doing what we can to encourage the use of those for storing private property, and doing what we can to encourage public use for transportation purposes of the roads.
So Tanya is over here, and on deck is Matt Buckley. Great.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I live on Powder House Boulevard. I've lived here for about 2.5 years now. I wanted to start by saying thank you to all of you for all of the work that you have done and all the work that you're going to be doing over the next year. I know a lot of us have a lot of anecdotal evidence on all sides of this discussion, and that makes it really hard to be dispassionate about this issue. And so having facts and statistics and numbers and studies is a good way for all of us to find some common ground and work from there. So I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of those numbers. And now for my anecdote. I grew up in Middleborough, Massachusetts. I was born and raised with suburbs and cranberry bogs. So I never had to worry about biking on the street. I also never had to worry about parking on the street. I lived life as a suburban. And I came here when I got my job in Somerville, and I decided to move to Somerville. And I suddenly did not feel safe with my bike. I have not ridden my bike here in Somerville because I don't want to die. And I also have a car, and I drive everywhere, and I drive home back to Middleborough all the time. And I have a driveway. I'm lucky enough to live here in Powder House with a driveway. But I have roommates, and a lot of us have cars. We park on the street, we park in the driveway. And yet, I want safety more than I want the convenience of a parking spot, especially if the studies show we can handle it. And the other thing about parking, especially in this area with so many students, college students and kids and everything, is we will adjust in time to whatever parking we have. And it will be unpleasant for a while. It always is when there's change. But I'm one of these new people who are coming in and I have a car. I'll get rid of it if I have to, because I want to bike safely. I want to get to Davis Square without worrying that I'm going to die twice a day. So thank you very much.
So just want to know, we're at 8:30, but we're going to keep going. We just have really a handful more. So just want to know the time.
Thank you, Brett.
So Matt is up, and then on deck is Grace Kesenich.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think the safety measures that they're putting in place in this compromise seems to be something we should all get behind. And they're going to be slowing down the traffic. They're going to be, and I see the complaints saying, "Oh no, we have to have it all one way." Where it's, where we remove the parking. Parking is important. I know they have 2- and 3-family houses on this street, and people say, "Well, they have driveways." Well, the driveways fit no more than 2 cars, and even if there's 2 cars, you gotta, maneuver. I rent it on Powder House Blvd, and I don't get to park on the driveway. Neither does my wife. And there are people that are elderly on this street. There are people who are handicapped on this street. There are people who, if they took out one whole side of parking, I hear it's 29 spaces. People are going to have to walk blocks, and that's going to impose and impinge on other neighbors. I hear people talking here about how they want to be good neighbors. We do too. We want greater safety on this street. There's been some horrific stuff go on here. But hey, you have to give together. There has to be compromise. That's what this is all about. That's my whole point is that, if you take out that parking, people are talking, what about snow emergencies? That's what we'll be living with every day if you take out one side of parking. That's what a snow emergency is. So we shouldn't do it.
Thank you, Matt. So Grace, up here. And then next up is Becca Wolfson. Okay, Becca's in the back.
Hi, I'm Grace, and I bike, I walk, and I drive. And I also live with my mother, who is 65 and has different transportation challenges, especially as she ages. And my husband also has been partially disabled in the past. And so cars are very important to my family to get around. And also bikes are very important to my family to get around. My kids go to school here, and I have walked them here, I bike them here, and I've driven them here. And it's really important that we are able to do all of those safely. I've also heard many times that people are upset that having more biking infrastructure will frustrate traffic and make traffic worse. But a lot of what this can do is pull more people onto bikes if they can do it safely, so that the people who need the cars are able to get other places faster. So what I'd really like to see is the whole streets concept to encourage more people to bike, so that the people who don't choose to or are not able to are able to use their cars or public transportation or anything else that would help all of us.
Thank you. Becca, let's go over to the back.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Becca Wolfson. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Cyclists Union. We're working to make it safe and comfortable for people in Metro Boston to bike as a means of transportation. I'm also a part-time student over here at Tufts, and I'm a Somerville resident. I've lived in the Spring Hill Union Square area for the last 7 years and go everywhere by bike. I got rid of my car a year ago because Somerville issues a lot of parking tickets, and it made me want to give that up. It wasn't convenient anymore. For the city to stand here and promote a design that has promote and promise a design that has zero parking impacts is unrealistic and is antithetical to the Vision Zero commitment that the city made. Vision Zero says the city has to use every tool in its toolbox to prevent people from being injured and dying, and that means making tough decisions. It also means problem solving and finding ways to make it work. Somerville has lost 2 lives to traffic crashes in the last 6 months after going so many years without any. On Mystic Ave, that's somewhat out of the city's hands, the state road. On Powder House Blvd, the city can manage that asset and make it safe for vulnerable road users. The city, Brad presented what the city did on Webster Ave, working with activists and residents to find a parking solution for everyone that needed to park a car when they took away parking on all of Webster, which was a critical corridor. There are solutions and tools in the toolbox that you can use after taking away parking here to minimize that. As I said, I'm a tough student. When I had a car, sometimes I would drive here and park on the side streets around the school. Sometimes I'd have my bike in my trunk and park a half a mile away and bike the rest of the way when it was convenient. You can try and pilot zoned parking passes where Powder House residents only can park in this neighborhood and prevent people with Somerville passes from around the city from parking here. There are tools. I encourage you to do them. We need protected bike lanes and safe spaces.
All right, so I'll start with Nathan Ritchie. Sorry to give you a heads up before. Nathan over there, and then Lena Webb is after Nathan. Lena, you want to raise your hand? She left. Yeah. Then up next is Katie Pierce. Katie here? Okay, great. Okay, so take it away.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm a Somerville resident. I just wanted to voice my strong support for protected bike lanes on Powder House Boulevard. It's an important road, and if we're going to take bicycling serious as a mode of transportation, it should be safe to do so on Powder House Boulevard. That's it.
Katie. And then after Katie is Eric Silva. Okay, Eric Silva.
Hi there, I'm Katie Pierce. I'm the Vice Chair of the Somerville Bicycle Committee, but I am mostly here as a Somerville resident and a Somerville taxpayer. I just want to voice my concern, knowing many people on the committee, many people personally who have children who commute via bicycle. I think it's been voiced here a couple of times. We want this community to be safe for children. We want this community to be safe for everyone who uses the streets. And one of the things that I think is essential for understanding the different problems here is to really make sure that we're taking into consideration the mobility needs of those who can't cross the street as quickly as others. What we do know is that protected bike lanes slow down vehicles, they slow down the traffic so that if something happens, if there is a vehicle that collides with somebody, slower speeds actually reduce serious injury. We want that here. We need this here. There has been a death on this street, and unfortunately, it's not something that we can turn away. I also want to remind people that what I feel is most important to Somerville is that we act as a community, that we understand that safety comes first for all of our residents. So let's consider the needs of the most diverse community here rather than necessarily the needs of very few. And let's make sure that we're working on a compromise that involves as many people as possible. So thank you for taking this time, allowing the community to come in and provide feedback. I'm hopeful that we'll find a solution that makes most people happy. Thank you.
Okay, and Eric is going to offer our final comment. Thank you for hanging around, Eric.
So I live on Powder House Boulevard. Sometimes I drive, sometimes I ride a bike. I use the parking space directly in front of where I live. I strongly support protected bike lanes, even if I lose the parking space that I use regularly. Last year, I became a father, and my risk tolerance riding a bike went down immediately, even when I'm riding by myself. Now my kid's old enough to go into a trailer that you tow behind a bicycle, and I can't leave my house with my son on a bicycle because of with the street in the condition that the proposed experiment even. I could go in one direction, but I couldn't get home. And yeah, I strongly support protected bike lanes because it's safer, and I think that safety is the most important thing by far.
So that's the end of the note cards that I have. So I just want to, before turning it back to city staff, just give a big thank you to all of you for really, I think, a really respectful dialogue, sharing so many great opinions, thoughtful comments, good questions. I think you all should be very proud of what this neighborhood did tonight, bring these ideas to this room. And I can't speak for the city, but I imagine they feel similarly and are excited to keep working with you on this. So I'm going to turn it back to George for some final words.
Sure. I don't have much to add to that, except that we look forward to continuing to work with you all. If you haven't signed in with a name, email address, etc., I really appreciate if you would, especially if you weren't at the last meeting. We put everybody who's interested in a particular topic on a list. We try to make sure they get information about new meetings and new data as we get it. If you're interested in some of the information that was on here, some of the data is already up on the Powder House Boulevard website at somervillema.gov. We'll add this presentation as well in the next couple of days. Feel free to reach out to our team. I think the easiest way to reach the transportation team is by email. It's transportation@somervillema.gov. We sometimes get swamped with emails, but we do read them all. So feel free to send them along, even if you don't get an immediate reply. Doesn't mean we're not reading them. We are, and we do appreciate it. I would look forward to having all of you back here in the fall. We have more information and more details to share.
And speed ups on the street.